So the pace of innovation clearly is not led by incumbents. It is being disrupted by, unexpected players in corners of the ecosystem which are usually overlooked. This panel here, today we will talk about where the next wave of disruption is coming from, what bets are these investors making, and how enterprises or any startup, they need to rewrite their innovation playbook to stay relevant. With me today, I have Jamie Roberts, Head of North America Venture Studio at Stellantis Ventures, Bhaskar Ghosh, Partner and CTO at 8VC, and Nika Ukpai, Chief Growth Officer at Pop Venture. So let me just open this discussion with a slide. So clearly, traditional ways of reading the market, it's changing. What investors are looking at is investing in companies that can sell business outcomes like cost savings or lead conversions over typical subscription models or per-seat-based pricing. Then there's also a lot of focus on investors, on founders, how agile they are. While domain knowledge, that's all great and good, but do they really have adaptability? Can they read the market signals and reinvent very quickly? Then a lot of focus is also coming back to hyperlocal winners. Let's say a Grab versus Uber in Southeast Asia. So investment in those companies really helps in staying resilient, staying profitable, especially in times like today, geopolitical scenario, regulated markets, and so on. And this one's my favorite. The new unicorn is a camel built to survive long dry periods. The focus is shifting to more capital discipline growth, user retention, life after novelty, over aggressive expansion. Then last but not the least, missions over market. A lot of investments happening in organizations or companies that can create new categories rather than just chasing TAM and monetization timelines. So my first opening question to you is, do you agree with these rules of investing, or is there more you want to add to it? Jamie, would you like to go first?
Sure, I can go first. So overall, I agree with the concept of what you just outlined. To add to that, I would say that the future of investing in startups, which is an area that I'm focused on, both from a project perspective as well as potential equity investment as well too, is how are those startups built to tackle big challenges that our customers, for example, are concerned with. So that's the first question I have for startups in that space. And then the second piece is, why are they pursuing this solution as well? Because that helps me to understand, are they going to be resilient enough to be able to weather the ups and downs that comes with being a disruptor, bringing about a new service or a new solution?
Right. Bhaskar, what's your approach to it?
Thanks for having me. Just very briefly, I'm a partner at 8VC. We manage about $7 billion, and we do mostly enterprise software with a very heavy focus on AI, and now increasingly on the services side and the BPO side also. It's a big topic. I would say, we are in a sawtooth phase where, AI especially has come our way, and things will change fairly significantly. So it's important to understand inside an enterprise. So if you look at traditional enterprise software, I would say creating new categories is going to be harder. Categories like software engineering are going to change. The contrarian view is, for SaaS providers, SaaS generally probably will not enjoy the level of multiple that it has. But if SaaS providers are controlling source of truth data, they should be able to catch up with GenAI, LLM-based automation stuff. So in a way, it's going to be harder to dislodge source of truth players. Sorry, is this working? we Hello? So I think enterprise software, there will be money to be made, there will be good tech built, but money to be made will probably be under harder scrutiny. And I think people who already have, companies which already have deep presence in enterprises will end up holding their own with some applied AI work. So that's one observation. At 8VC, I think we are looking much more expansively around the AI-enabled services area of all sorts, software services, but non-software services typically also, where there's a large BPO and services aspect with human in the loop and with unstructured data flowing through them. And we feel that market over the next 5 to 10 years is going to get changed significantly, but the nature and the rate of the change is going to be difficult to ascertain. And I'll just say one more thing, and I'll say why. In software and computer science, when waves like this has come, if you look at areas like healthcare, logistics, they're generally 5 to 10 years behind kind of the cutting edge of SaaS companies in adopting tech. If you look at interoperability APIs, traditionally, large TAM regulated or unregulated industries have not caught up that quickly. They do, but 10, 12 years later. Now, one of the challenges we have as AI-centric investors is we are looking at so many levels of change. We are looking at infrastructure change inside the enterprise. We're looking at middleware and application change. That itself is massive. But we're also talking about vertical software workflows changing in high TAM verticals. We're also talking about services changing. You're talking about 3 or 4 concentric circles where changes will come. I think we're probably being a bit too optimistic around the rate of change in all of these layers. So one has to think very deeply about what do you do bottom-up investing of incubating in smaller startups who will go after an area like, I don't know, logistics, accounting, or do you actually go do roll-up plays the way some VCs are thinking? So I think some of these themes cut across what you just brought up, but I think it's an interesting and exciting time to be building and to be investing.
Absolutely. Nika, how do you evaluate a startup in terms of disrupting an incumbent?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I thought it was actually going to be a few minutes, at least 5 minutes before I had a hot take. But I'm going to say that I believe that venture and traditional early stage investing is primed for disruption itself. I think that it needs to be right-sized. We're seeing a lot of venture firms reinventing and reimagining themselves as RIAs, as marketing firms, leaning into making other types of investments to diversify themselves because venture has traditionally been an underperforming asset class. And so when I think about the rules of investing and the fact that they're changing, my first thought is that I think people are going to have to get back to first principles. People are going to have to get back to disciplined investing. And the days of these really overinflated valuations that are not sustainable over time, I think are behind us, at least for now. And we talk about AI, it's a category unto itself. And I joked earlier during breakfast that at this conference, if we were playing a drinking game where we had to take a shot every time someone said AI, the conference would be over, right? We've been talking about it a lot because it's ubiquitous. At least AI vertical integration is going to be key to any future innovation, and I think that it's important that we recognize that. But taking a step back and looking at where disruption occurs, I do not believe that there's a such thing as a company or an industry that is disruption-proof. I think that if you are not investing time and energy and effort and money into figuring out how your company can be disrupted, you are prime for disruption. And so when I look at companies that I'm looking at investing in, I'm looking at not only whether they have dedicated resources to investigating whether they can be disrupted, and I don't mean just having an idea from one person once in a blue moon, I mean having somebody or a team looking at market trends and how you can do better or how somebody can do better than you. I also think about how companies are leaning into agility, so I'll index on that. There's always power in the pivot. And a lot of times startups build solutions that they believe the market wants. And once they get to the market, if they're not paying attention to their customers, customer empathy, customer feedback in a constant loop, they're primed for disruption. And so I look for founders who are willing to disconfirm their own beliefs, or stated differently, willing to disconfirm their own assumptions. And I think that entrepreneurs who are agile, not only agile, but willing to listen to others and willing to lean into diversity of opinion are going to do better than any other founder across the board.
Right, the will to change. So you have worked in fintech and healthcare, right? And in your experience, what can these traditionally regulated industries teach us about innovating responsibly without sacrificing the speed, of course?
For me, interesting question. So I spent about a decade in big law doing primarily anti-bribery, anti-corruption, anti-money laundering work on behalf of big corporations like Microsoft and SAP. And my sole job was to keep the C-suite out of jail, no matter what. All over the world, we will pay whatever fine, we're sorry, we'll apologize. And I found that those skills of leaning into regulatory entrepreneurship were particularly applicable to the startup space. A lot of times when you're talking about innovation and being truly disruptive, you are going to piss off the incumbents. There will be people bigger, with more money, deeper pockets, and better relationships that will try to put you out of business. And I think it's so key to make sure that you're building in a way and in a jurisdiction that allows you to survive whatever regulatory challenge is around the corner. So I will say that I have a background in the law similar to Kevin, the CEO of Avasant. I think that being able to analyze a company in terms of its outside exposure, regulatory risk, enforcement risk, is critical. And so for any founders in the audience, for any entrepreneurs in the audience, for any CEOs in the audience, if you are only using your lawyers to give you legal advice, they are underutilized. They can think commercially as well, especially if given the direction and empowerment to do so, and help you assign risk to how you're building and where you're building. And the last point I'll make on this subject is when you're doing something really disruptive, as has been pointed out multiple times during this conference, the law is always slow to catch up to innovation. And so when you're building, if you build what I call a self-regulating body, a company that you know, even if there isn't a black and white law on the subject, you know that even in the gray area, you are doing the right thing for the customer. You can always have a good faith argument for why you can request a regulatory sandbox, and you can invite the government along to innovate alongside you. I know that that goes against conventional wisdom, especially when you think about companies like Uber that just went ahead and flooded the market without seeking regulatory approval. I understand why they did it, but I think in this day and age, you can never be too careful.
Right. So switching gears to disruption and mobility, Jamie, where do you see the biggest innovations coming from? Is it the hardware, the software, or entirely new ecosystems, shared autonomy, urban redesign coming into play?
No, that's a great question. A brief history about the industry. I think at one point, competitive advantage was built on the product, so the hardware, the vehicles, and then it switched to pricing. How do we compete on pricing? And then it switched to customer experience. Like, how do we not only deliver a great product for a great price, but also to a great experience? We're now in the phase of ecosystems. So I think as important the hardware is to get that right, and also too with regards to like batteries, EV batteries, making sure that we have the right chemistries to meet the right use cases for our customers. I think in the mobility space, what's becoming more and more apparent is that ecosystem building is where the future lies. So essentially, how do you plug those vehicles into the broader world around them, whether it be through connected vehicle services or whether it be through energy markets, things of that nature. So that's how what I see as the important areas within the mobility space.
Right. And Bhaskar, coming to you, 8VC talks a lot about, fixing broken industries. Could you talk a bit more to it? And also, what are the, one or two foundational systems, due for a complete rewrite in this next wave of disruption that we see?
Yeah. So the founder of 8VC was also the founder of a company called Palantir. So if you guys, many of you may know, some of you may not know, is Palantir was a very contrarian company. It essentially started off with a very service-heavy view of things around go-to-market and data integration and new data, enterprise data ontologies, and went into finance, into GovTech and defense. and went into healthcare. And only a couple of years before IPO, kind of reorganized a lot of its software stack for it to become a product company. So we have this DNA around, it was a fairly contrarian bet if you look at a blog post that came out in 2013-14 about the smart enterprise. We have always paid a lot of attention to what we call workflows, human in the loop workflows in enterprise, which is not the traditional Silicon Valley way of looking at things. You mostly look at source of truth and data. So that DNA has helped us, I would say, be ahead of the game around vertical SaaS in traditional industry. We have a very strong health IT, bio IT practice. We also have a very strong defense practice. We have a very strong supply chain logistics practice, which we started way before anybody else in Silicon Valley did. So in the culture of the firm, we try to look at legacy verticals which will remain important and which will grow, instead of chasing, I would say, only forward-facing stuff. And we try to look at these verticals, regulated or not, where sticky human-in-the-loop workflows are possible. And now what's happened is, with the advent of Gen AI and LLMs, it so happens that most of these workflows, which are economically upside-oriented in legacy enterprises, including government, unstructured data is a very large part of what flows through them. So just want to make sure that instead of saying, only talking about the verticals, I want to give you guys a little bit of flavor of how we think in terms of the actual workflows. If you look at a recent blog post we wrote, we talked about data ontologies from the first phase of the contrarian view of a smart enterprise. And we said the next deep thinking that has to be done in the presence of Gen AI is in what we call process ontology. That you have to understand, you have to do process mining and discovery to understand how processes, human-in-the-loop processes, actually work in these legacy. So instead of talking about the verticals only, I just want to give you guys a little bit of a nuts and bolts view of how things are working. And it's hard to be contrarian and say, here is something that is backward-facing that is not working. And kind of, it's kind of boring. It so happens the world has now gone full circle and has made us look good, because now everybody and their sister and brother is now talking about AI-enabled services, AI-enabled BPO. It so happens we were thinking about that and doing that before probably any other VC. So I'll just make a note of that. In terms of forward-facing stuff, we are working very hard on AI-enabled services. We are looking at it two ways. One is we're looking at bottom-up 0-to-1 incubations in certain verticals, some of them announced, some of them not announced, and actually doing fairly deep AI work and automation work as part of the startups. But we're also looking at roll-ups, which some other venture funds have looked at. And that's a tricky area, which brings PE and VC closer to each other, and it's an undefined area, which is why I mentioned this whole concentric circle idea. So anyway, those are some of the underlying drivers. So I don't think I answered your question directly, but at least I want to give you a flavor of how we are thinking about the actual core systems, as you called it, software and human systems, which will be changing very rapidly over the next 5 to 10 years.
Right. So one closing question, if you had to place one contrarian, bet on a startup category or market geography or let's say technology that most are overlooking at this point, which one would it be and why?
If I wouldn't be talking about it in public. But I think we have come to a point in Silicon Valley, in Silicon Valley, just say in venture capital circuit, where I don't think it's possible to say or do something dramatically new anymore. So that's something we should all humbly kind of think about. I think, I wouldn't call it contrarian, but I think software engineering as a discipline is going to change a lot. And venture capital should pay a lot of attention to it, because that is the cornerstone of the modern enterprise. How will it change? How much of it will be code-gen stuff? And the implications of it around governance. So that's one aspect. We're also kind of worried and interested in something that is not VC domain, which is about education in general. If software engineering changes so much, what happens to what kids learn in college? What do you learn and what do you not learn? this can have profound technology-driven social consequences. Are you going to go make money from it? That's not what I'm saying, but I think it's our job as people who invest in technologies to also think about the 2 or 3 degrees of impact it has. So those are a couple of
Right.
pointers.
Thanks, Bhaskar. Jimmy, what's your bet?
My take on that is that there's a lot happening in the energy space. So I'm very excited to see how certain countries that maybe haven't had access to stable energy will be able to leapfrog over some of the past energy sources to these new, clean, renewable energy sources that will allow them to have stable energy to be able to build businesses around, community around. And one of my favorite sayings is that energy equals prosperity. So as these markets come online and have stable energy, that's going to create new business opportunities as well within those markets. Also, I would say distributed energy resources is another area of focus. EV batteries presents a unique opportunity to help support and stabilize the energy grid, and through battery on wheels, essentially, and we'll be able to move energy around in a way that we haven't been able to do in the past. So that's another area that I'm excited about, and what opportunities that presents for our customers too, to be able to support the energy markets around them, aggregate their vehicles with energy that they're generating and storing, maybe from solar panels, battery storage systems, with those others around them, to even form like virtual power plants that can power, their community and their city in ways that we haven't been able to do in the past. So that's what I'm excited about.
Great. Neka?
It's an interesting question, and the word contrarian is funny to me because what I'm about to say I view as common sense, but I know it's not widely accepted to be true in Silicon Valley and Massachusetts and New York, where the majority of VC is deployed. So I'm going to say it anyways. Invest in women. $30 trillion. That's the amount of women-controlled capital that we're going to have by the year 2030, just 5 short years from now. And that represents a 6x increase over the last 25 years. And surprising to no one in this room, women have the power of the purse. They control a lot of global spending. But in addition to that, women as angel investors have increased 9x over the last 25 years. Women as general partners in venture firms have increased 5x over the last 25 years. And so what I'm seeing as a trend is folks who view this as an opportunity to invest in solutions that impact the lives of women will be able to realize outcomes that outperform the market. And I'm a trustee at an organization called Springboard Enterprises. It's been around for 25 years. We've accelerated a little over 900 women-led startups. We've had 228 significant mergers and acquisitions and 30 IPOs, all women-led companies. And you don't know the name Springboard because it's not a household name, but it's led in unicorn creation only by Y Combinator. And so anybody who views investing in women-led companies, and I'm defining that as any company with at least one woman in the C-suite, anybody who views that as charity is missing a massive opportunity, because mixed-gendered teams outperform all-male teams on every vector that matters. They return more capital per invested dollar. They exit 12.5 times faster. They are outperforming the market. And so contrarian or not, I think Silicon Valley and traditional venture capitalists have an opportunity to index more on companies that have teams that represent the diversity of America. And in doing so, we'll be able to recognize increased gains.
Thanks, Neka. Thanks, everyone.